let's get this party started. So thanks to everybody again for coming. This is something that's been an exciting process for me. I released the book, Think Like a Game Designer, just over a year ago, and it's been awesome to see the response and people that have come and showed me their games and people that have been inspired by it. I've been doing the podcast now since February, and that's been great. We've been able to talk to a lot of amazing designers, and I've learned a ton from those conversations. In fact, I'm going to be talking to Richard Garfield next week and asking a bunch more fun questions from him. So I'm excited about that. It's always great when I get to have a conversation with Richard. But one of the things I really want to do is find more ways to help, because as great as reading a book is, as great as listening to a podcast is, or reading emails, or like following up, the process of learning to do game design is a interactive one. It's an iterative one. So unless you're actually doing something and getting feedback and getting direct responses, it's very hard to really get better at the craft. So one of the things I wanted to do with this webinar is to really encourage you to go and do the thing, right? Actually take steps to move forward and get practice. And so you can get feedback. So I'm going to give feedback directly here so you can iterate and get to a better place in your own designs, in your own goals, regardless of what you want to do, whether you want to become a professional game designer, whether you want to design something for fun, whether you want to start your own business, whatever you guys want to do. Those are things that you have the capacity to just put yourself out there and take those risks. So a little bit of my background, I started kind of talking about this a little bit at the top of the call. I started out as a Magic Pro Tour player for Magic the Gathering. It was back when I was 17, I won the US National Championships. I traveled all around the world playing cards, and I made a living doing that. I paid my way through college playing Magic, and that was kind of my first like deep dive into gaming. But to be honest, I never really thought of it as a career. I never thought of it as anything serious. It was just kind of a fun way to make enough money to kind of, live life. And I, seemed better than flipping burgers, after class. And I then went on to go to law school. And the reason I went to law school is because my parents were both lawyers, and that was the thing I was supposed to do. And the reason I like to tell the story is because, no matter where you are in the world, and we have people here from all over the world, there's something that you feel like you're supposed to do. There's something that you feel like is required to, whether it's from your parents or your culture, or like what counts as like success, right? And that programming controls us in our lives. And it's one of the things that we can fall into a trap. And there's plenty of people that live their whole lives never figuring out that they've been living somebody else's idea of success. And so that's what I was doing. And I was in one of the top law schools in the country. And I was spending $50,000 a year to do something that was making me miserable. I was just incredibly unhappy. And it wasn't until that summer after my first year of law school that I was lucky enough to get an internship at Upper Deck, which was a company in San Diego that was making the Versus System trading card game. It's like a Marvel and DC Comics trading card game. They wanted to invite me out to come and like test their games and give some feedback. And the reason I got invited, this will become relevant later on in the talk, is because I had, written a lot of design articles when I was a pro player and done a lot of interviews, and I'd made friends with a bunch of people that were very smart and very talented, and they were working on the project, so they wanted to invite me out. So I built some relationships and it added some value to the community, and they got me out there. And then, it was something that made me come alive. I loved it. I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. And I quit law school and moved to San Diego and became a game designer. And that was not an easy decision. It sounds like an easy decision now looking back 20 years later, but at the time it was incredibly painful and very difficult to do. And I tell this story because when you have to face those decisions yourself, and you have a choice between following the path that you're supposed to do and following a path that's really true to you, that's something that you're going to really be passionate about, I want to encourage you to follow that passion. Now, there's bumps in the road that are coming, and there's a lot of challenges that come with that. So I don't say do it blindly, but I do think you want to be able to follow that calling. And that's why I'm here now, because when I started that process, going to Upper Deck, I didn't know what I was doing. Just because I was good at playing games didn't mean I was a good designer. Being a good designer is a totally different skill set, right? As a pro player, what I wanted to do was deconstruct a game, break it apart, and then make it, and then defeat people, right? I just wanted to just, win. And as a designer, your number one goal is to create an emotional experience in your audience, right? It's, you want to create impact for your audience, for your players usually, but sometimes it's a streaming audience or a variety of other things. And being able to figure out how to create an emotional experience using the tools you have, which are rules and art and theme and story and all the components and every piece that goes into it, is this totally different skill set. It's about creativity, it's about art. And so I had to learn from scratch, and I read a bunch of books, and I asked a bunch of smart people, and I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, a lot of my early games, my early designs were absolutely thinking like a player, not thinking like a designer. And so I had all those bumps in the road, and I eventually wrote the book and have been doing what I'm doing to try to help you guys kind of learn from my mistakes, right? Make life a little bit easier on your path. It's not going to be easy, but hopefully it will be easier. Let's dig into some of the questions, okay? Because I want to get to the, again, very specific stuff that you guys are asking. And so I'm going to start with the number one question that I get asked in one form or another by everybody. This one, the version I got here, is from Scott Ilkenhans. I hope I pronounced that right. It says, the biggest issue I'm having is how to move from design to tested to market. My friends say Kickstart, but I have one failed under my belt, and I learned I'm not able to compete on Kickstarter, and I don't have an artist on staff. And what's a guy like me supposed to do to get my game out there? And so, variations on this, how do I get published? How do I get to market? How do I get my game out there, are the most common question I get. And I want to address this on a couple levels, because one, you're almost certainly starting in the wrong place. Okay, getting good at the craft of design has to be your first and primary goal. If you don't have a great game, trying to focus on how do I get it published, how do I get it out there, is a mistake, because you're not going to have a good product. Even if you're the best marketer in the world, if your game's not good enough, like maybe you'll have a little bit of success, but you're not going to really learn. You're not going to be able to get something that's going to be enduring and it's going to last for a while. So making sure that you have a great game is really goal number one. And that's going to be through the processes like I've talked about and the other designers have talked about, going through the core design loop, iterating, learning, getting feedback, and realizing when you have a great game. And one of the ways to figure out, this is another question I got, is how do you know when you have a good game? The best way I've found by far is when you're playtesting your game, people are asking you to play again without you prompting them, or without you in the room is even better. Because most of the time when you're showing off a game, you're like, hey, come check out my game. And people that are nice will play your game, and they might say nice things to you. People will often say nice things to you, even when it's not a game that they would ever play again on their own, and they're actually doing you a disservice. So for those of you out there that are giving feedback to other game designers and giving feedback on other games, being nice is not helpful. You can be polite in the way you give feedback, but giving feedback that's clear and gives people things to hook onto is key. So usually you have to look at implicit feedback, not explicit feedback, right? Explicit feedback is them saying, hell yeah, it's great, I love it, good job. And the implicit feedback is things like where they're like kind of looking at their phone and they're like not paying attention and they're kind of disengaged, or they're like, okay, let's go do something else now, right? The things that you can watch for and pay attention to will give you a lot more clue as to what's actually going on. Okay, so that's at one level. Now I'm going to share a graphic with you guys. I usually like to kind of not do a lot of slides, but I'm going to share a graphic with you because I think it's important. Let me see if I can figure this out. Webinar technology. Okay, you guys can see this key questions pyramid, I hope. This is, for me, the best way to analyze almost any really important question that you're going to have. And this is something that I've developed over time, and I'll explain what it means. So anytime you ask a question, most people start at how. How can I get published? How can I make a living as a game designer? How do I publish a book? How do I start a company? How do I yada, 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 right? Everybody has a how do I get in shape? Everybody starts at how. And to answer a how properly, you have to answer the questions that are underneath it. And the clearer you are and the better you are at answering the questions that are lower on this pyramid, the better your answer, your how answer is going to be, the easier your how answer is going to be. So for example, when you ask, how do I get my game to market? The question is, what does that mean? How do you define to market? Because if you want, you can just scribble a game on a piece of paper, you can post on Craigslist, and you can say, hey, give me $5, my game's on the market, right? Does that count? Most people would say no, that's not really what they're looking for, right? And so what you're looking for has got to be really defined. And for different people, it's going to be different things. Remember, don't get trapped by the idea, other people's idea of success. So just because, some people want to make a multi-million-dollar AAA video game doesn't necessarily mean that's what you want. Maybe it is. Maybe you want to just make a game that's really fun for you and your friends to play. Maybe you want to make something that you want to be working with a team. You want to get a job at you want to get a job at Wizards of the Coast working for Magic the Gathering, or you want to get a job at Riot, right? You want that, what it is that counts as your game to market and what it counts as success for you, if you don't answer that question, then figuring out how to get there is going to be impossible, right? You really want to be able to dial in what's important for you. And then to go a level deeper than that, say what I know what's important to me. You need to understand, why is that important? Why do you care? What's going to drive you, right? What is it that I just want to be able to be creative and express myself? Because if that's true, if it's just like a thing you want to do and you want to be able to express yourself creatively, then the bar is a lot lower and you can get away with a lot of different things than if it's like, no, I really want to be able to have this huge impact. I want to make a game that tells a story and gives a message and becomes, you know, the next Lord of the Rings or whatever, right? That's a different kind of thing. So knowing your why, knowing what drives you is critical to be able to answer this question. And then when I first started giving this talk, I actually used this, I had this pyramid, I stopped there. And it wasn't until, I don't know, about 8 months ago, a year ago, that I added this deeper layer, which is the who. And the who is really important because the whys really only feed into the who it is that you are and who you want to be, right? What are the values that matter to you? Is it learning and growing? Is it connection, right? For me, that was a big thing. Those two are the big ones, like where I started playing games. I started falling in love with games because of the connection that they had, right? I'd play around the kitchen table with my family. All my best friends to this very day are people I met around a gaming table. And the other things that value is like learning and growing. I love the challenges of games. I love the challenges of design. And those are the things that motivate me. So I take on a lot of crazy projects that don't necessarily make sense to a lot of people. I work on an educational game with the Wharton School of Business, designing better ways to ideate. I do different kinds of crazy projects and work with nonprofits. And I try to find different ways to learn and grow and push myself and do things that are a little different, because that's what's important to me. So knowing those questions there will help you decide what you need to do. And then, by the way, the same pyramid is useful when you're making your games. When you're saying, how do I make a great game? What game do I want to make? Right? What's the premise? What's the core of it? What's important? Well, okay, wait, why do I want to make that kind of game? Right? Is this am I making a card game to serve, you know, to have it in mass market and have it on Target shelves at Target? Well, okay, who's my target audience? How do I sell to them? Am I selling to a toy company that then needs to get it onto Target? And how do I find out what they want? Right? Being able to dig to these questions is critical at every phase of the process. Okay, enough of that graphic. Hopefully that was helpful. I see that people are asked some questions that are coming in. Is that, is this going to be recorded? Absolutely. We're recording it. I didn't even know we started, but we did. So I'll make this available so people can do it. It's, these are kind of timeless principles that work in any creative field and anything that you want to do. Like when I've used these principles and I ask these questions to when I figured out writing my book or when I started my company or, any new project that I take on, I use that pyramid to evaluate it and to think about how do I build what I want to do, which is go each level deep. Okay, so let's get granular, okay? Because I know sometimes this can be a little too philosophical for people. I love thinking about things in those terms, but let's get specific. So let's say that the answer to your who question and your why question is, you just want to make games for fun. You want to make games that you and your friends can play. You just enjoy it. It's a hobby. You're not looking to make it as a career. In that case, a self-publishing route is totally reasonable, right? You can go to sites. You can build your own prototypes at home and try them out. If you want to make them look a little nicer, you can get graphic designers and art done through sites like Fiverr and Upwork. There's also artists can be found on sites like DeviantArt, where you can get people and you can actually license art that already exists. So you don't have to necessarily pay for original art. If you're just going to kind of keep it home, you can get things printed on sites like Game Crafters or Drive-Thru Cards. These are all easy ways for you to get something made that looks pretty good and that will be serving your purpose. However, if you want to be publishing something that's going to reach a large audience, self-publishing is incredibly risky. You can lose a lot of time, a lot of money, and you're going to spend a lot of your time not being a game designer, but being somebody that's running a company, trying to figure out marketing, trying to figure out sales. So it's very, very difficult if the core of what you want, of who you want to be as a game designer, right? I wouldn't have started my company if I hadn't already been a game designer for years when I was working for somebody else. And once I built an audience and once I'd learned all the ropes and once I'd gotten kind of my feet under me, then I started looking into going things on my own. Similarly, a lot of people ask about Kickstarter. When people are looking for Kickstarter, it's very, very hard to succeed on Kickstarter without some kind of an audience. And that is just an unfortunate reality, but there are ways for you to build your audience. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. There are ways for you to get connected out there and to make it succeed, but it's not something that you can just put up a game and say, ha, here we go, this will be fine. It just is very unlikely to succeed, and I don't want to set people up for failure. And I always tell people that even though it's called Kickstarter, you should be thinking about it as Kick Finisher. Because you want your project to be pretty much done. You want it to look really professional. You want to have the game that, as I said, you want to have a game that's already awesome, that you already love to play, that people are begging you, knocking down the door to play before you go on there, because that's going to get you a much better and much more likely success rate, of course, and you'll know what you're doing. But again, I think in general, if you're getting started and you want to get your game out there to a large audience, you're better off finding a publisher. You're better off finding somebody else that knows what they're doing. You can learn, you can connect to them, and you can get a little bit more focus on, again, what you can do best if you're interested in being a designer, and let other people handle the riskier parts. So that's something I recommend. I've talked a lot about how do you do that, right? How do you get involved with a publisher? But there's a couple of key things. And in general, let me see if I can get to another graphic. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so this was the key questions pyramid. This is the core design loop. Anybody that's unfamiliar with this isn't the graphic I was looking for, but this is like the fundamental principle of design. I talk about it at length in my book, but it's basically what the core loop that you should be going through again and again, right? You start by getting your inspiration, then you frame your project, which is to say you define who it's for and put some deadlines around it and what your parameters are going to be. You brainstorm, which is the way you sort of create this open flood of ideas, try to figure out as much as you can, organize it, then create something that's very small and easy to prototype, test it, get feedback, iterate, do it all again. I'm not going to dig into that a lot here because I've talked about it at length elsewhere. I can if you want later on in the questions. But what I wanted to talk about was the career era. This is how you can grow your career. If your job, if your goal is to put yourself into a, if your job is to, if you want to make a living in the gaming industry, you want to figure out what's going on and you want to be able to get out there, these are the 3 steps that you want to do. You know, I've numbered it 3, 4, 5 for no good reason because, you know, new graphics. You want to be able to add value to a community. And the way you add value can be a variety of different ways. It's very unique to you, right? The reason why I was able to get a job in the gaming industry when I first got that internship was because I had been, you know, shown success in gaming by being out there, but I'd added a lot of value to the community. I wrote a bunch of design articles. I'd helped other teams test for the Pro Tour. I made friends. I did some interviews and I did some of the public facing stuff for Wizards of the Coast. So I showed that I could be a good person to work with. I helped people, I added value to the community, and that is what got me in the door. And then maybe yours is different, right? Maybe you are, you know, volunteering for some of the publishers that you want to get published with at conventions. Maybe you're writing online reviews. Maybe you've started your own podcast. Maybe you found a local gaming group. Just starting a local gaming group where you can provide a great game night for people will help you find those people will be happy to help play test your games and maybe even help promote your games or spread the word on Kickstarter, right? And then that leads into the second part of this, which is building relationships and community, that you're going to be growing your community by helping other people, right? You add value, people are going to want to hang out with you, and you're going to build more relationships, and you're going to build a tribe of people. And that's why when you start doing that, hey, you have a local gaming group, and then maybe you have a gaming convention, or you have a blog that a lot of people are following, or whatever. Now, all of a sudden, when you put something out on Kickstarter, or you have a game you want to get play tested, or you want to approach a publisher, now they're going to pay attention to you. And then again, learning and growing is just about always through the process. Have humility, right? You always have room to grow. And if you're not succeeding, don't look at it as something that is like a wall that you're hit, like, oh, well, I can't do it. Nobody's paying attention to me. It's over. I give up. I'm out of here, right? That's a very common response. The people that succeed at the highest levels are the ones that say, okay, this didn't work. What can I try again next time? Or if you get rejected by a publisher when you pitch to them, take their feedback. Say, hey, what could I do to get you something that would be more successful next time? How could I improve? And I'll tell you, man, because I get a lot of pitches, the people that show me that they listen and that they come back and they learn and they do better next time, I pay a lot of attention to those people. And they're the ones that I come back to again and again. And then I'm much more likely to listen when they come and pitch in the future. Okay, so it was showing the previous graphic. Oh, I failed. All right, let me see if I can show you the other graphic. Does this work? Did you guys see the, I can't both see my screen share and see your responses. Hopefully this career arrow thing worked. But basically, it's a very simple graphic for those that can't see it. Oh, here we go. Chat. Yes. Fixed. Great. Career arrow. Yeah, and this was the core design loop that I was talking about before. We'll get this is basic stuff, and I'll have it recorded and post things later, and I can share some of this stuff with you, even a better graphic that's properly numbered. All right, so I'm gonna stop the share. You got the principles here. Okay, so that's the basics of the get published question. There is another question that I received about the how do you know what the unique selling point of your game is? How do you identify the unique selling point of your game? And that's a really great question, because part of the process here, part of the challenge of the like, we live in a golden age of games, right? It's amazing to be both a player and a designer right now, because there's tons more great games out there. They're easy to access and sell, right? You can just post stuff online and sell things on Amazon. You can sell games on Steam. You can get to conventions and just start pushing stuff out there. You can print on demand. You can get stuff cheaply. It's amazing. Production is easier than ever, but getting noticed is harder than ever, right? Getting people to pay attention to you is the problem, because there's 300 games every month that get released. Why am I going to listen to you? Why am I going to waste my time passing by a store shelf, or any of the countless hours I could be spent playing games? Why am I going to play yours? So having a unique selling point is critical. The question of how do you figure out what your unique selling point is? Twofold. One, try to refine a really good elevator pitch. Right? The concept of an elevator pitch is you get into an elevator with somebody, maybe a wealthy investor, whatever, and you only have until it gets to the top floor and they get out to convince them that they want to pay more attention to you. So you want to be able to put your concept into something that's 2 sentences, maybe 3 at the most, that people can understand and get right away, right? And usually you do that by combining 2 things. So, right, like Ascension was the deck building from Dominion and the drafting from Magic the Gathering, or with a fantasy theme. Right, and or you can have Magic was pitched as it's like a Cosmic Encounters, but with cards that you can play in between rounds of Dungeons and Dragons, right? And these little things that then get people hooked and get, oh, that's interesting. And then the other principle of this is the way you know your unique selling point is when you say it to somebody, they go, really? Oh, wow, that sounds cool, right? They like, what? You saw how my body posture changed? You saw how I came up and I came alive there? That's what you're looking for. Right? You want to have something, whether it's a component on the table, or if it's a specific mechanic or an art style, it can be anything, but it's something that makes people sit up in their chair and come over and be like, okay, that's interesting. I haven't seen that before. That's cool. I wish I had an easy recipe for you to figure out how to make that happen. It's not. That's what the core design loop is. But that's a real key to the process, is being able to get people to, like, in a very short span of time, because that's all you have, whether that's they see you're posting on Board Game Geek or on Steam or an article online, you only have minutes, usually seconds, to hook them. And so that's really something you always want to be thinking about when you're talking about selling your games. Now, again, if you want to make games that are just super involved and cool and just for you and your friends, of course your friends are going to play your game. You don't need a unique selling point. You can just make whatever you want. But if you want to get something that's going to be successful, you got to figure out what that unique selling point is. Okay, I have some more questions that people emailed in, but I want to start taking some questions from the audience here. So let's see. As a designer, how do you think about trends in mechanics or designs? For example, a roll and write has been hot. Do you see it as an opportunity for exploring that style of game, or something to steer away from? Okay, so that was from Chris. So that's a great question, Chris. When it comes to trends, I think of them in 2 ways. One, it's great to know what's out there. Right? By being able to see what's out there and get a lot of gristle for the mill of creativity, you're going to be able to have more ideas and do more things. Because in general, like, there's nothing original, okay? All artists are thieves. And anybody that tells you otherwise is just a really good thief or in denial. We take things from other games and we combine them together with new ideas, and then that's what makes the new thing. Right? I couldn't have made Ascension without Dominion and Magic existing. I couldn't, and other people have taken these mechanics from Ascension and built on top of that. And that's great. That's the way the process goes. So by exposing yourself to a lot of different things, that's great. So you should always be paying attention to trends for that reason. If there's a new cool mechanic, you want to know about it. Now, as far as chasing trends goes, I'm not as big a fan of that, right? You want to be able to do something. Game design is hard. You are going to spend a lot of time sitting there bashing your head against the wall. Okay, like, so let me tell you about the creative process. Creative process, there's two awesome parts of the creative process in my experience. At the very beginning, you have this new idea and you're like, oh my God, it's going to be the coolest thing ever. And it's going to do this and it's going to do this. And people are going to love it. And they're going to cheer in the halls when I come by and tell them, and they're going to throw a parade. And I'm going to win an award. That part's awesome. Then, and at the end, when you have a thing that's done, right? When it's out there, it's in your hands or it's in players' hands and you see people enjoying it and you see the game there, right? I do that a lot of times when I'm at a convention and I can see people playing the game and really loving it or giving feedback. That's amazing. It's awesome. It's just such a rewarding thing to bring joy to people, to connect people. I'll have like a father and son tell me that they were bonding over my game. That's great. And everything in the middle is horrible. I'm sorry to say it's might be a slight exaggeration, but you know, you are going to be constantly working around with, oh, that didn't work out as well as I thought, and that's not really quite it. And then, oh, this person didn't like it. I'm not really sure what to do here. I can't really afford the thing I thought I could afford. I'm running out of time with my dev team, right? All these problems are going to come up. And if you're not passionate about the thing you're doing, if you're not passionate about the game you're making, you're going to fall off. You're not going to finish the cycle. You're not going to push yourself through when things get tough. So if you're chasing a trend, that's not going to be the thing that's going to drive you. That's not going to be the thing that makes you awesome. But if you see a trend and you're like, oh, that's cool. You know, I wonder if instead of just doing a roll and write, it was like, you know, a roll and then maybe there were some stickers on it. And I always wanted to make a game with stickers because I played with stickers when I was a kid and I made these cool little dolls. And what if it was like rolling and you created these figures and you put the stickers on them and then the characters would battle and you'd have a character to go with you at the end, right? I just came up with that right now. But if it's something that's driving you, something that's exciting, and you have your own little spin on it, go for it, run with the ball. But don't just do something because you think it's popular. Okay, hopefully that answered that question. Let's see what else we got here. We have, as a business owner, what do you think about physical versus digital? Games deserve to be one or the other, or just a Venn diagram of potential audience? So that's a good question. And I actually am pretty well positioned to answer that question because I have made physical games that became digital games. I have made digital games. I have made physical digital hybrid games. And there's a lot of challenges that come from both and advantages that come to both. And you have to understand what you're buying into, right? So for example, physical games have the advantages that you can, you know, easily just say what you want to happen and it happens, right? When someone says, you know, all players can, you know, point at each other and that'll get you, and the last person to point takes 3 damage, or the person who gets pointed at the most draws a card, then you can just write that on a card and everybody knows what to do and it happens. Whereas when you're programming, it takes a lot of effort to make a card like that. And how do you even do pointing and what does that mean? So your iteration cost and time is way, way lower in physical. So I always recommend, regardless of whether you want to do physical or digital, you should start in physical as much as possible and prototype in physical as much as possible. Even going so far as like when I'm making a digital game and there's a computer that has to do parts of the work, I will pretend to be the machine and people will play and I'll like give them the feedback that the machine will give them. So that's one thing about physical games in general, it's valuable. Digital games, as I kind of already alluded to, they do a lot of the work for you. You can do a lot of messy things that just happen, right? If I calculate fancy behind the scenes, armor rating is the square root of the attack damage minus the rating minus the whatever, right? You don't want to make that in a physical game. It's a nightmare. And so a digital game can do that. If it's mobile and it's on your phone, right, you can have a game that is going to be easily accessible, but also that people are not going to have as much attention span for, and you don't have as much screen real estate. So you have to be really thinking about your screen real estate. So the type of game you want to make, like when I made Ascension, I wasn't really thinking, I got a little bit lucky to be honest. I wasn't thinking about the digital version when I made the physical game, but it just so happened that the game had I did want to have a smaller footprint than Dominion, right? So just the 6-card center row made it easier to have a way for people to see it on a small screen, and it worked really well in digital. When I made SoulForge, which is a project I worked on with Richard Garfield, I made a purely digital card game where the cards themselves leveled up. And that actually was very difficult to you couldn't make it physically. It was very hard to make physically. In fact, we tested physically. It was a pain in the butt. So we got to do some cool things, but we didn't get the advantages of having physically getting around and socializing and trading cards and whatnot. So there's a lot of different things. It depends on the game you want. If you want a physical digital hybrid game, then you're going to have to take on the sort of costs of both worlds. So it can be a powerful thing to do, but you have to really think about your constraints. What is it you want? What's your who's your target audience, right? The same key questions pyramid that we talked about before. You want to dig through before you answer that question. Okay, cool. I have, let's see what else we want to dig here. Do you ever get tired of designing? How do you get past it? No, I love this. This is something that I figured out how to do where I would not, I would do it even if I wasn't getting paid. And that's a really key thing. But if you are getting bored, and here's one thing I really love is I always have about 12 projects running at the same time. Of those 12, I'd say 5 are like very active, like they're all in production and like they're definitely happening in the near future. And then there's a bunch that are like, you know, in early stages of ideation and getting partnerships together and figuring out what works, what doesn't. And so what I find is when I get stuck on an individual game, it's really helpful to jump to another project. And by jumping to another project, I can kind of clear my head. And often I'll find connections between the projects where I'm working on. So I worked on Shards of Infinity was our newest deck building game, launched about a year ago. Really enjoyed it, took all the lessons I got from years of working on Ascension and made like a very fast-paced, very cutthroat deck building game that I'm very proud of. And now we just launched the app this year. But we also worked on Shadow of Salvation, which is the expansion, the latest expansion, which turns it into a cooperative game. There's actually a full story mode. We have an online audio book that you can play for free from there. We have the storybook in the game, and we had a voice actor do the audio recording for it. And it's like a little, almost a choose your own adventure game that you're playing, and you all work together. And then that project was very difficult for me because I'd never made a cooperative working together game. All my games are competitive. We're trying to kill each other, or at least, you know, compete with each other. And so that was a very difficult game, and I got stuck on it a lot, and I would have to jump to other projects. And then now I'm working on a game with Mike Selinker called Hyde Society, where the players actually are taking the Jekyll and Hyde formula, and they can either cooperate to fight all the evil forces that have the Jekyll and Hyde formula out in the world, or you could take a little too much formula and then maybe you're competitive and now other people have to try to attack you. And so actually the skills I learned from working on Shards of Infinity, Shadow of Salvation now have helped me in this game and vice versa. So I for my personality, and maybe for yours, if you're the kind of person that's getting stuck, you can maybe have a few other projects to jump through and something else to break through those creative blocks. Okay, let's see here. Oh, you're looking at my screen icon. Somebody saw my Scrivener icon. Okay, well, I'll give that away. So Scrivener is a writing tool, and I used it to write my book. It is not something I use for game design generally, but it is was a very helpful way to sort of organize chapters and do different writings. But I do use a lot of prototyping tools. In fact, we have a custom prototyping tool we've made, which I'm interested in potentially trying to make a version I could share with you guys, because it's really kind of an internal tool, because being able to have ways to organize your files and when you're doing a collectible game to build decks and to be able to do new versions is really valuable. There's a bunch of products on the market, but actually, I'll tell you what, if I did make something like that, and let's say it was a subscription service thing that existed where you could prototype your own games very quickly, load in art, just take any spreadsheet, like a Google spreadsheet, link it in, it would turn them all into cards for you, you could print them out. How many of you, by show of hands, using the hands button, would be interested in something like that? Just so I can kind of get a sense. Because it is something, it's hard to make these things that are public and available and work better, because when it is buggy, when I have it, I don't, my team deals with it, but you guys wouldn't want that. Okay, looks like about a third of you. Cool. Okay, anyway, so having some tools that are serviceable to you is really valuable, but don't let that stop you, right? You can just make prototypes as cheaply, as quickly as possible. I talk about this a lot in my book, but you really want to just whatever it is, whether it's writing on physical cards or using, you know, if you can use Photoshop, great. If you just want to use clip art and just use paint, that's fine. Whatever you can do to get yourself iterating quickly is really the key. So tabletop simulator is another good one somebody mentioned that you can use. Whatever it is that is your specific, you know, what's easiest for you is the most important thing. And there's never been a tool out there in public that I loved, so that's why I had one built. But hopefully some tools out there are useful, or I'll let you guys know. You'll be the first to know if I make mine better available. You know, actually, I think this provides a good window. I have a question I want to ask, because so there's two things. One is I very much believe in feedback, right? This is when I talk about the core of the iteration process and the core design loop, is that you have to be able to get feedback, see what works, see what people really want, and then refine and improve, right? So this is where I ask questions and want to give people direct access to me through the email list, and be able to, and I realized I got too many questions that I answer all via email, so I wanted to do this webinar. But I've also been thinking about some other projects that might be cool to help you guys and help connect this community. So we're thinking about things like doing a live workshop, maybe doing like a weekly group call where people can, like, you know, post and give progress on their games and get some accountability. I actually even have a little journal. I have a little journal thing that I use, that I keep track of like all my projects, and I write down what I'm doing that day. And I'm actually working on making something that might be like a good public version of that, so you can see my process for getting things done. Of the things that are out there, what stuff might you be interested in? I'm going to post a little poll, and you guys can actually just click on this and see which of these things are interesting to you. You can pick multiples, and you should be able to vote now. I've never used one of these before, so if you can see the poll or see an option to vote, go ahead. So we have a live workshop, a live hands-on game design workshop, where you like maybe fly to San Diego, work together, get it all done. An online course that you could sign up for and do at your own pace. Weekly game design mastermind, which would be like a weekly call or video conference where we have some professional designers and some aspiring designers, and you just, you know, work through your own stuff every week. The productivity journal I talked about, like a little specific guide that gives you step-by-step every day. Here's how you get creative work done. Or the biggest idea that I've been thinking about is like a big summit, you know, where I fly in a bunch of like well-known game designers, and they do lectures, and we have breakout workshops, and we do game nights, and the whole deal. That's a bigger production. But just of you guys that are here, since you guys are clearly interested in this sort of thing, and some of you are missing out on your 21st wedding anniversary, I'd love to see what you guys are interested in here. So I'll give it another like minute or so. Most people have voted, not everybody, but we're most of the way there. Give everybody a chance to actually vote. Sounds like a lot of interest. Online course is currently the front runner. Pretty cool. And a lot of interest in the summit. So while that's going on, I'm going to look at some of the other questions here. How do you know if your game is overly complicated? How can you simplify mechanics while still keeping the original idea intact? That's a great question. Do you want to know if your game is overly complicated? The answer is probably it is. Almost every game pitch I ever get is somebody trying to say a game that has too much going on. Now I know that's not super helpful to you, but work with the assumption that your game can be more elegant. And it's so easy to get attached to the specific things that you're excited about because they're your babies, right? They're your mechanics. They're super fun. They're the things you were really into. All right, it's been about 2 minutes. I'm gonna end this poll here. Great, thank you guys for the votes. Appreciate the feedback. So here, I'll share, I can even share the results so you guys can even see. Look at that, public results. So we've got the online game design course was the most popular, but it seems like most people would love to also do this big summit thing, which I'm excited about, but it's gonna take a lot of work. So I'm gonna work on that. All right, let me get back to the question. So overly complicated games. So work with the assumption that your game is overly complicated and see what you can pare down. Less is more in design, and that's true in art, in writing, in all design. You want to make sure that you have the minimum amount required to get your core message across, to deliver the emotional core of your game. So how do you do that? You have to know, go back to the key questions pyramid, right? What is the core of your game? What's the thing that's most important, right? So when I work with Ascension, Actually, I'll use Skulls and Sails as a great example, right? When I work with Ascension, when I build new expansions, the Skulls and Sails was our 15th expansion. And it was, I have to come up with new stuff all the time. But when I create a new mechanic, and for Ascension, and Skulls and Sails is the most complicated mechanic we've ever done. It's the most ambitious. Instead of a center row of cards, now the center row is split in half, and you have every player gets a ship that moves around and can interact with cards and can raid each other and has a crew rating, right? And that's a lot going on. So the reason that I asked about this, and the reason why I was able to do that, is I asked the question, what is Ascension about, right? What's the core of Ascension? And the core of it is the interaction with the center row, and then the varying tensions around wanting to get certain cards, wanting to prevent your opponent from getting certain cards, and the way that we evaluate those differently as we're playing through the game, the strategies that evolve based on what I've already purchased, what I haven't. And so every time I do a new mechanic, I want to do a mechanic that increases the tension of the core mechanic, that increases the focus on the core mechanic. So the way that Skulls and Sails works is the crew rating of those ships lets you buy any card that they're on the same space as. But now the spatial relationships between the spaces on the board of Ascension matter in a way they never did before. So I took the same thing we had, which was a center row, and I made the locations of them matter, which never mattered before. So now I care about where things are and where you are relative to me. And so it made the core tension, the core mechanic, more interesting because you have to look at it from a different angle. And if you go back through every single set of Ascension, no matter how crazy it is, it's always some twist on that same core mechanic. So if you have a mechanic in your game, and you can have very complicated games, right? It's not to say that, there's nothing wrong with making a complicated game. But if a system in your game, if a component of your game, if a mechanic, whatever, of the game doesn't support and increase the focus on the core mechanic, on the core tension, the core emotion, cut it. It's not doing you any justice. And if you love that mechanic you got to cut, go put it somewhere else. Save it for another game. So hopefully that's helpful there. Okay, what's next? Done with that one. So I have a question about what's the difference between framing and brainstorming from Phil Kingston. So these are the two of the phases in the core design loop. And that is basically framing is when you create the frame, the box within which you're going to play. So you start with an idea, right? You have a variety of ways to get your idea. But then before you can start brainstorming, it's really helpful to have an idea of basically answering the questions in the key questions pyramid. Who am I trying to serve here? What kind of game am I trying to make? So if I'm making a game for 6 to 8 year olds that can be played in 10 minutes and could fit on a shelf at Target, that's a very different game than I want to make a first person shooter that's going to have, tons of adults playing and, streaming online. And once I know what that frame is, then it makes it much easier to start brainstorming. Brainstorming is where I'm going to start coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas. Well, maybe it's a first-person shooter where they're shooting candy canes instead of guns, and maybe that means that you're going to have a sugar rating, and you can increase your sugar score and get higher energy or whatever, right? You can brainstorming. You're going to go all over the place and come up with a ton of ideas, and but the frame helps you to kind of direct you to where you want to go. The other thing about framing, I'll say, that's one of the most important things, and I say this all the time, but deadlines are magic. Okay, this is something that is really, really valuable to know about because when you have a deadline, you say, all right, I know that I want to get this game done, or I want to have a prototype ready in 2 weeks or a month, or for my next playtest session or the next convention I'm going to. That helps you really focus on building something for real. Because when you're going to say, I'll build a AAA video game that's going to be published and make millions of dollars and be a huge thing, well, if you've never actually published a game or you've never made your own game, that's just too far off a goal. So you want to be able to frame some deadlines and create some parameters that are something you can really move with. I'm all for having big, ambitious goals, but you got to break things down and start small and be able to find ways to iterate and grow from that. Okay, next question. Having fun, guys. This is awesome. This one's a tough one. How do you get a game to be fun? I have a concept that I think is solid, but it's been through 3 iterations and I haven't gotten it to be a fun experience for the table yet. Okay, how do I get a game to be fun? Well, the basic answer is one you're already starting on, which is, iterate, right? Like that's what you have to be able to keep trying until you get there. But I know that's not as helpful as you want it to be. So let me try to get more specific. What is fun for people is creating tension, right? A lot of times, so one of my favorite definitions of games is that they are the voluntary acceptance of unnecessary obstacles. Okay, the voluntary acceptance of unnecessary obstacles, right? So if you take chess, for example, right, the objective is to capture the opponent's king. Well, I could just reach over and grab it and I got the king. Ta-da! But that's not very exciting. So I accept all these bizarre restrictions, all these bizarre obstacles. Okay, well, knights can only move like this, and castles move like this, and it created all these restrictions to create this sort of tension around, oh, I want to get the king, but I can't. I gotta do this and this and this, right? And so that tension is where fun comes from, ironically, right? Because you think, oh, tension's bad. No, it's that buildup and release of tension is what we find fun. It's what we find exciting. And that the same is true when you're trying to figure something out. There's this like tension of like, I don't know. And you see a move and you're like, aha, I got it, right? And then there's a bunch of other ways that you can create fun kinds of interaction and tension, right? When you're playing a social game, apples to apples or Cards Against Humanity, right? You have this tension around like, this is kind of inappropriate and I don't know what's going to happen, and then everybody like laughs as this release of tension that, oh, that's funny and it's inappropriate, but it's okay because we're all here together, we're all in this joke together, and that's a release of tension. It's a big part of why we like jokes and comedy also. And so you want to be thinking like, what is the tension of the game? Where is drama coming from? How can I win and lose? What's at stake? And that creates a lot of where the fun comes from. That's why like card games and dice games are so much fun intrinsically, because there's always that tension of like, what's going to happen next? And if you've a lot of times, this ties into another thing I hear a lot, which is like people want to know how to balance a game, and they want to make a game that's like perfectly balanced. This was one of the problems I ran into when I was first becoming a game designer, right? I started out as a game player where I would find the broken cards and they were, oh, this is too good, and I would destroy everybody, and haha, that was stupid. Those game designers don't know what they're doing. And so when I first started designing games, I'm like, I'm going to make all the cards perfectly fair. Everything's going to be even. It's going to be this just battle of wits between players. And as it turns out, that's a terrible thing to do. Yes, you don't want cards that are completely degenerate and completely broken, but you do want to have some differences. You want to have things like, oh my God, I can't believe he played that card. Or, oh my God, I can't believe he played that card. And then I won and I did all this and that, right? Like those stories now, again, right? Get people out of their chair, get them excited, get them coming alive, right? That's the stuff you're looking for. So you want to find those moments where you have these big, high buildups of tension and release of tension. And there's a ton of different ways to do it, and figuring out how to do it. Once again, go back to the key questions pyramid, ask who you want, what kind of game you're trying to make, what's the tension you care about, who are the people you're trying to serve, what you want to build out of, and that's going to kind of help guide you as you go through your iterative loops. All right, hopefully that's helpful, because it's a big question. How do you make fun? All right, what are some lessons you learned from SoulForge? What unique challenges did you face trying to create a purely digital card game, and how would you tackle it differently if you were attempting to make it today? Okay, I don't know if I can give this one full justice, because it is a question that has a lot of answers, but I will give you the highlights. First of all, I learned a little bit of humility. Prior to making SoulForge, most of the things I had done were very successful, and I had just kind of learned stuff along the way, and I figured I would just figure it out. And building an entire digital team and learning how to manage programmers and learning how to build everything all at once, all off of a Kickstarter where people had expectations already, where I had made promises to the public and they were really important, and we were under the gun. And also I had no idea how much everything would cost. We asked for a $250,000 Kickstarter. We got close to $500,000, and I had to end up getting investment, and it cost me over $3 million to make that game. That was a very difficult thing. So lesson learned is everything costs way more than you think it's going to. You really want to be able to learn and find ways to find other people you can partner with that have expertise in the areas you don't, when at all possible. Building the pure digital game, I'm actually really proud of the way the game itself came out. I think we really made an awesome game. I still am proud of it, and I'm still working actively to try to bring it back to life. The team was really great to work with. And so I learned a lot about also how to manage a digital team. And I'm sure if I were doing it today, it would be infinitely better. Being able to build things in a more agile way, being able to reduce those costs, being able to focus on the minimum viable product and getting something launched that will work without sort of the full vision of what you want, being able to build it quicker and easier, and then work on the broader vision over time. And then I also think that the thing that today the market has changed, right? When we made SoulForge, there was no good, in my opinion, at the time, there was no good online digital card game, right? Magic Online was a real poor imitation of Magic. It had a lot of problems. There was no Hearthstone. There was no like any real competitor. So I think we were kind of, one of the first to market, but Hearthstone like announced that they were coming out right as we did. And then those guys are way, they have infinitely bigger budgets. They have great games. Magic Arena is a great game. So if I were going to make a game today, I would really want to be very focused on finding my niche and making sure that like I could keep my budgets low and find an audience, like a good core audience. And I think I would build a different business model around it too, because I think the classic kind of buy packs and freemium model is a little bit broken and people are a little bit tired of it. So a lot of things that I would do differently. So I will hopefully get a chance to answer that question in more detail by actually bringing this thing back. I've been working on it, but it's a big project. Okay. Next question. What's your advice for approaching publishers? How do you like to be approached? From John Youngs. Okay, I answered this a little bit already, but I'll dig into it a little bit deeper. You want to be courteous, be respectful of their time, add value to the publisher or to the community, ideally ahead of time, right? The people who volunteer, right? We have a cultist program where we invite people to come and play test our games early and give feedback, and that's really helpful. It helps us to improve our games. And maybe some of the cultists, they were the first ones that got invited to this call, and they get to ask questions of me directly, not just on this call. And those people, when they pitch me stuff and they have questions about their games, I'm much more likely to answer them. I'm much more likely to pay attention because they've been helping me, right? That's just human nature, right? It's not to say I won't listen to you if you don't do something for me, but let's just be real, right? The more value you add to a community, the more value you add to a publisher. Volunteer at conventions, be nice, do reviews of their games, whatever. That's an easy way to get yourself noticed and move forward. Other than that, try to create a good sell sheet, create a unique selling point. Something where, again, get me to get out of my chair. Like, wait, oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen that before, right? And try to get something because you only have a couple minutes to really get them to like care or pay attention to you. But just very basically, you can approach them at a convention is the easiest because there's people there and it's harder to say no to somebody to their face than like over email. Or you can just send an email, be polite, be persistent. Everybody's publishers are very busy, so it's okay if after a couple weeks, be polite and say, hey, yeah, I sent you this thing a week ago. Is there a good time to follow up? Yada, yada. If it's not working for you, can you, give me some advice on why? Take it as a learning opportunity. When they say no, try to figure out how you can do better next time. Make sure you know the publisher ahead of time. Make sure you've researched them and that you're giving them things that are going to be fit in their wheelhouse and their audience. It helps to show that you're not just trying to get, you also understand their needs and you're trying to help them. So those things all really help. And again, that's true regardless of what career you want. Those are good skills. Okay. We're getting close to 7. I only said this thing was going to go for an hour, but I'm tempted to keep going because there's at least 20 some odd questions. So what do you guys think? You guys all right if I run over a little bit here? How about a show of hands for people that are willing to hang out a little longer for me to answer some more questions? All right, looks like a go. And if you guys, need to leave early, it's okay. I understand. I appreciate you being out there, especially you out there with your wife waiting for your 21st anniversary. It's okay. You did great coming here. You don't have to stay the whole time. All right. So, Jason Novak asks, like video games these days, should tabletop card games be planned and pitched with expansions in mind? I think the answer generally is yes. I think it's really helpful to be able to show that there's a future in what you're doing. You don't need it, but even for not a trading card game, right? Even for Ascension, like I had 3 years of story planned before I launched Ascension. I had about 2 years of like concepts for mechanics and things that were ready to go. And so it was really helpful for me, not just even if you never launch an expansion or it's about pitching, just knowing where you want to go really helps you to define the best way to build the thing you want now, right? And tying into the earlier question about being able to make your game simpler, right? And remove complexity. One of the best ways to remove complexity is to pull mechanics that aren't necessary and use them for future expansions, right? That's exactly what I did with Ascension, right? Like the fate mechanic, was originally in the main game, and we had a bunch of other really cool little like kind of complicated cards and ongoing monster rewards and stuff like that. And we ended up using those all to make future expansions by simplifying the basic game. So okay, let's see. Do you ever feel like you're adding too many mechanics when designing a game? Too many ingredients in the cake? I think I kind of already answered that question when I talked about complexity. Turn on this fan here, it's getting a little hot. So I think I'm gonna, basically it's always something that's on the top of my mind. I'm very, probably more than most designers, like I am very focused on really just cutting down to only the most important things. I think everybody that's a great designer does think about that sort of thing, but it's a very valuable skill to have in general, that you just want to always try to cut ruthlessly things that aren't helping you. How do you become a full-time designer? I kind of already answered that question. Again, it depends on based on what and who you want to be serving. What does it mean to be a full-time designer for you? Are you working for a big company? Are you working on your own, etc.? Let's see here. I live in the center of the country and I can't attend many of the cons. Are there any other online options that you know of to get publisher feedback? There are. You can actually, submit things via online email. You can post stuff. There's different kinds of game design jams. I also have a Facebook group that I opened up. It's called the Think Like a Game Designer Workshop. You can join, and I check, and there's a bunch of other designers in there, so you can post your designs and try to get more feedback and like kind of get a little community going. So that's something, if that's of interest to you, it exists right now, and you can just join up. But usually, if you're trying to go to a specific publisher, find ways to get to their channels, right? So if they have outside playtest groups, you want to join those outside playtest groups. If they have online forums, you want to be very active on those forums and be the kind of person that they want to know. So it's all about finding ways to add value and get their attention. Okay, Jason has a business marketing question. This question is really long. I have a digital TCG that's close to alpha. Let's assume I'm not delusional and it's close to MTG Arena in terms of presentation with cool mechanics. This question is too long. 3 months ago, it's okay. Generating buzz. All right, this isn't really a question. He's got a trailer. All right, sorry, man, I don't see a question in here. We'll try to dig it through here. What are your thoughts on the future of distribution models for cards and miniatures games? CCG, LCG, core versus expansions. Okay, that's a good meaty question. So the future of games. So one of the ways I like to think about marketing games and sales models for games is that is a game in itself, right? And you should be building your game to match the marketing model. And sometimes you can use a marketing model to help you figure out what your game should be, right? So if you're going to build a game that is a subscription model game, like World of Warcraft, then you want to have mechanics and things that are going on a longer timeline, right? That's why RPGs like that have grind, right? You want to encourage people to socialize and spend a lot of time on there because I want to keep your monthly subscription going. If you have a game that is a TCG that you need to have randomized pack models, then you need to make sure you have new cards, and the excitement of getting new cards and totally upending the game each time is really important. But as people learn about these models, then they start to realize that the TCG boom, you can only really play 1, maybe 2 trading card games seriously, right? Because it takes so much money. It's this deep, deep well of spending that you're going to do for something that has a lot of rarity. But that's why things like deck building games came out. Frankly, it was the thing I loved about making Ascension was it's like you can get a lot of the fun of a TCG, and you spend $40 and that's it. You never need to spend anything else ever again. If you want to buy an expansion, great. If not, it's fine. You have everything you need. So being something that's more, and if you want the app, you can download the app for free right now. So being able to have a business model that is more friendly to the audience, that's more useful is really great, but you need to make sure that you also can make a living as a designer. So figuring out what the future is, I don't know what the future is going to be. I always like to experiment and try different things. I think the LCG model is interesting. I think the Keyforged game is really interesting that Richard Garfield made, where each deck is unique. a unique combination of cards. So you're not customizing it at all, but each one is different, so the experience is different. I think the legacy style games are really interesting, where you might buy the same game over and over again because you want to, you change it as you go. But each one has different questions it asks of you as a designer. So you need to think about what kind of game you want to make, right? Again, just going down to those key questions to be able to figure out what the right business model is for you. And I think you're going to see a wide variety of business models over the years. I can't really tell you, which ones are going to be dominant, but I think people are more savvy to the classic TCG models. So you're going to see less of those unless they have a big IP or something or a huge budget behind them. It's very hard to survive, even related to the question that I didn't fully get to answer, or didn't fully see the question about an online digital TCG. Like, even if your TCG is great, like let's say it's just as good as Magic, it's just as good as Hearthstone, but it's you on your own, you still need to find a way to convince me to leave Magic or Hearthstone to come play your game. And the only way I'm going to do that is if I know all my friends are doing it. And the only way to get my friends to do it is, okay, now you have a lot of problems, right? Like, now you have to have a big budget, you have to have a way to market, you have to have, or some kind of really powerful, unique hook that, people are going to care about. So it's very, very hard to be competitive in that marketplace. Whereas if it was just a $9.99 game I could download and I have all the cards and I could just play as much as I wanted, well, okay, my barrier is a lot lower. Maybe I'll give that a shot. So you really need to think about where you are in the market to figure out how you want to sell stuff, what kind of game you have, etc. Okay, let's dig through a few more. What's your first reaction in playtesting when someone at the end of the game calls out something as, OP, please nerf? Well, at least they said please. So there's a couple ways to answer this question. One is you really want to be focused on the right things at the right time. So I talk about this a lot in my book. They're what I call the phases of design, right? When you're working on core engine design, when you're working on figuring out how this game ticks, what's fun, where's the fun at, what's going on, OP doesn't matter at all, right? A playtester that's telling you this card's OP is missing the point. What you care about is, like, is this fun? Are players engaged? Are they paying attention? Are they sitting at the edge of their seats, or are they turning away, right? You don't care about the game being balanced yet. So those questions you just ignore, those comments. But then later in the process, when you do start getting to the end, where you really do want to find your balance, then okay, now there's something to pay attention to. But as I said earlier, you don't want to be just making you don't want to make everything even. You want some cards to be better than others. You want some effects to be better than others. You want some strategies to be better than others, because that discovery and process is fun. And that tension of maybe don't have the best thing, but I can still win by being clever or whatever, that's fun. So when people shout out OP, now you got to start evaluating, okay, is it really OP? Is it really a problem? Or is it something that they just lost and they're looking for a way to complain? Because a lot of times people just do that because, oh, I should have won, so that card's OP. And so the way that you should try to decide that, obviously having some people that you trust that are very good at this sort of thing. This is where being a good game player really helps, because you can kind of sense it better than most. And also just paying attention. If it's just one person that says a card's OP, you could probably set that opinion aside. But if everybody tells you that card's OP, even if they're wrong, the perception matters, right? Like, we've definitely had mechanics in the past that are not, they feel very powerful even though they're not, and people just don't like it because they feel like they can't win when they get played. And so those things we end up cutting anyway. So, like, for example, in the game Bakugan I'm working on, we have, or any game where you're gonna use resource destruction as an effect, where, like, I can do land destruction magic, or getting rid of your energy, or just like somehow making you discard cards, right? Making you, like, not be able to play the game. That's really not fun to lose to. It's a very negative play experience. And that, when those mechanics in games, I will always turn the power level down. Not that they can't exist, because some people just love to grief, and it's fun to have. Sometimes you have, again, the tension of, like, oh man, I only had 3 cards, but then I was able to do this and this. So it's still fine to have those mechanics, but you don't want to make those the most powerful thing. But if the most powerful thing is there's a giant dragon that shows up and, like, breathes fire on everything and, like, runs around the board, that's cool. That's okay if that's the most powerful thing. So you want to put the power where the fun is. And then also, the other tip is try to always, when possible, include silver bullets, right? Give yourself, if one strategy becomes degenerate, try to make sure there's at least some tools in your game that if you know that your opponent's going to use that strategy, there's a way to counter it. And that's a really good way to help get out. Great. All right, it's getting kind of late, and I know a lot of you are on different hours. For those of you that are dropping out, I will post a recording of this later so that you guys can catch some of the stuff you missed. I'm probably only going to go another 10 minutes here, and then I will also get going because I am off to Mexico tomorrow. I'm going to go with a group. We're going to be building some homes down there. I'm very excited about it. It's going to be like the 6th time I think I've done it. It's really awesome, super fun thing to do. Let's see, next. When will you open up the Cultist program to more people? Good question. We do a new call every year that lets people in. We did one already for 2019, but we will do another one in 2020. So keep an eye out on our email list, the stoneblade.com email list. I assume most of you are already on there, but if not, we'll send an email out when we're ready to bring in more cultists. Let's see. Another Ascension question. When will the cultist have his or her day? We always joke about slapping the cultist because there's just the one card that gets hit over and over again. The poor devil's been through a lot. I agree with you. We've often had a fun set of questions around the office of, having the cultist set and having the cultist giant, turn into a giant monster. We even made a cultist bobblehead doll back in the day. So we all love the cultist, but he's kind of you love to beat up on him. So no promises on that when he's going to become a more dominant player. I have a question from Jonathan here about how long should it take to get to your first game? If you're getting started, how long do you think you should get to releasing your first game? Again, that's just a hard question to answer because it really depends on what you mean by releasing your first game. To answer it from my experience, from Ascension, from my initial concept till I got it out for sale was about 14 months. But I had 5 years of experience in the gaming industry as a designer and working for another company, and 15 years or so before that also of as a pro player and knowing the community. So it could take a while. But if you just want to make something that you can launch with your friends, or a game that I would make now when I'm going to make a new expansion, it takes me maybe 3 months of design work and 3 months of production, and I can get something out in 6 months. So it varies, and the complexity of the game varies, but I would expect at least a year to really get something that's quality if you're just getting this, if this is the beginning of your process. And it also depends how rapid your iteration loops are, right? If you have a playtest group that meets every day, like I have, a team of people that I work with every day, so I can get a great game done in 3 months. But if you're only meeting once a week, well, okay, 3 months now is going to expand out 7 times that long, so it really depends very much on your personal situation and what your goals are. When designers cut out content they loved about their original design, did that usually become an expansion later? Okay, I answered that question already. I find I enjoy creating the core mechanics from a game when the game requires a larger card file of hundreds of cards. It can seem overwhelming. Is there some sort of technique for dividing and conquering a huge card file, Robert? Okay, Robert, I do talk about this also in my book, so I would recommend picking that up. But the short version is try to create a skeleton where you have some structure. This is where breaking things down into factions, breaking things down into chunks is really helpful, what we call micro-stepping, where you basically take a big thing and break it into really, really small chunks so that each chunk is not as intimidating as the big try to do everything all at once, right? You don't need to. When you're first testing your game, you just need enough cards to play. When you're starting to build out a full file, you want to say, okay, we need a certain number of big creatures, a certain number of small creatures, we need a certain number of spells, and just build a blank file that has the structure you're looking for, and then just, knock it out chunk by chunk. Creating cycles is really helpful, right? So if you have different factions, you want to create a card that gives you, lets you draw a card, and lets you draw a card and then has some kind of cookie, some kind of benefit. Cookie is the game design jargon for some good thing for the player. Everybody wants a cookie, so when you want to make somebody do something, you give them a cookie. So you want to make a cycle of cards that all draw a card and give you a cookie. Okay, what does each faction do? So here's the blue one, here's the green one, here's the whatever one, and that can help you kind of think about what to do and how to fill in the gaps. So that's how I'll approach a big project when I want to move forward. Let's see here. I did that one, I did that one. I'm making good progress here. You guys got a lot of questions, but I'm powering through. Question following up on the kick finisher comment. In that case, what are you principally allocating the money for? So kick finisher, when I say kick finisher, there's still, what I mean is that the game mechanics are done, that most of the art is done, most of the graphics are done. So, and that you have something that you could put on a table and show to people. But there's still a ton of work to be done after that, right? So maybe if only you want to finish the rest of the art, you want to do the packaging, you want to do, and actually physically printing the game, or let alone a digital game, actually producing, having a prototype and having a full game. There's huge amounts of work, huge amounts of costs. And so Kickstarter is the way you kind of get yourself across that finish line. It also helps to answer a lot of questions, right? So, I am working on an exciting new Kickstarter for next year, but I'm not going to talk about it right now, but I will. You'll be the first to know about it. And I don't know how many to make, because it's something brand new. I've never done it before. And it's like the volumes matter a lot, right? If you make a lot of them, then I can add more stuff to it. If I only make a few, then maybe that's not as good. And so Kickstarter is a great way to know ahead of time. So you're risking some capital, maybe 10 grand, 20 grand, 5 grand to get art done and get your time done. And then you hope to get enough that you can really make a game that matters. That's kind of what I mean when I say kick finisher. There's still a lot to finish, but the core design, the core questions, the difficult questions, right? The key pyramid questions. Who is this for? What is the fun? What's going on? What's the basic play pattern? What's the theme? Why do I care? What's the unique selling point? All that stuff's got to be done before you go to Kickstarter, or you're going to have a bad time. How do you find play testers willing to stick around through the iterative testing process? i.e., how do you prevent playtester burnout? This is a great question. Playtester burnout comes from you constantly asking for things from them and never providing value back, right? When I talked about adding value, building community, going through that process, the key to that is to be able to make sure they're having a good time, right? Don't just spend all time playing just the game that you're working on that's maybe not that great yet. Have some other games played. Make sure you got some Doritos and Mountain Dew around, have some fun. Make sure you're giving value and showing how grateful you are to them for their time. If you host a regular playtest night, if you're doing a lot of things that make their time a good time, then great. That's going to make it easier for them. Another good tip, don't bother to test your whole game all the time, right? If a game is falling apart, a lot of times you only want to test a core mechanic. And if you see it's not working, just stop the game, right? If your game takes 2 hours, but you can learn what you need in the first 20 minutes, don't force people to play the whole 2 hours. Be very respectful of their time, and make sure that what you're doing is very targeted to get the feedback you want. And then again, just add value, make sure it's fun. People love hanging out with you. People love your game nights. If you're busting out your game for 20 minutes a night, and other than that, it's 2 or 3 hours of super fun times, you're not going to burn out as fast. Okay. I think I got time for maybe 1, maybe 2 more questions here. Let's see, that one's done, that one's done. Let's see. I want to get some good ones for the last questions here. All right, let's see. What's your process for playtesting and assessing balance as you make games? What do you typically look for as you watch people play your games during playtests? So this one is a great question. I've touched on it already beforehand, but depends on where you are in the process. So again, I talk about in my book, if you have if you're at the core engine phase at the very beginning, you're just looking for things like engagement. You're looking for, are people excited about what's going on? Are they paying attention? Are they doing the kinds of things that you thought they would be doing, right? Are they engaging with the systems you in? Are they doing things you weren't thinking? Is there something that's fun that they're excited about that you didn't think they'd be excited about? Are there areas where they're getting confused and not sure what's going on? Whereas when you go later on in the process, you want to be looking, when you're getting towards the end and polish, you want to make sure that your templating makes sense to them, and you want to see if then the OP comments start to become more meaningful. And so you always want to be paying attention to the important questions. Every prototype you make, every playtest you run, you're like a scientist running an experiment. You should have a hypothesis, and you should be knowing what it is that you're going to try to test to see if that hypothesis is right or wrong. And it's okay if it's wrong. It doesn't matter. Many of your hypotheses are going to be wrong, but so you always want to be saying, how are people engaging with the question that you have right now, right? If you're building out the full structure of a TCG set and you have different colors, you want to be asking people questions. And I have questionnaires that I'll give to people or ask questions live. I even have a questionnaire you can download. I believe it's justingary.com/questions. I'll correct that link if I'm wrong. But it's something where you can ask questions about what people like, what was your favorite part of the game, what was your least favorite part. You really want to prompt the negative stuff because that's way more useful. People will always tell you that your game's great and they had a good time, but like figuring out what's wrong and what could be better and what they don't like is more important most of the time. So I'll prompt for those questions as well. Okay, this is it. It's going to be the last one. Let's see if we can get a good one in here. Genuinely curious if you have any relationship with White Wizard Games, being that Shards Infinity is like Star Realms' brother from another father. Well, yeah, I mean, Rob and I have been friends forever. We worked together on Ascension. Obviously, I helped him with Star Realms. We've been, we played on the same Magic Pro team for years. We are still really good friends. We're still talking about working on new projects together. So we are very close, and I love their games and they love our games, and we continue to. Part of why I'm here is to make more people make more awesome games, and he makes awesome games, and so I love that. Let's see here. I've got, oh yeah, so I confirmed here that, yeah, justingary.com//questions is the questionnaire that I use, and you guys can go ahead and use as you see fit. Okay, this is a little meatier question. That was kind of a fun question. This is my last one for reals this time. This is from Randy Harriman. At what point do you scrap ideas and start a new one? So the question is, when and how do you decide this is not going to work, let's find other ideas, versus keep iterating until it works? This is one of the hardest questions as a designer, as an artist, as an entrepreneur, right? When do you keep going and when do you quit? Because on the one hand, I've said this over and over again, right? You got to be persistent. You got to get through the hard parts. You got to iterate. You got to keep going until you find the gems. But on the other hand, sometimes an idea is just not going to be there, right? You can keep trying to make the best horse and buggy company in the world, but in reality, you're probably going to lose out to Uber and cars and whatnot, right? It's just a bad business model, so you probably should quit. So the way that I try to think about that is a couple-fold. One, I will always put a deadline in a certain window within which I will for sure keep working on it, right? So I will push hard to say, all right, I'm going to work on this for 3 months and I'm going to try to get this to a place where it's fun. So I'll set a deadline ahead of time and I won't quit within that deadline, barring something like horrible catastrophe, like a, avalanche or something, right? Because it's too easy to quit too often. And so that's an easy, so that's one way to just make sure you get through it. It's not just your emotional fear that's stopping you. Step one. Step two is there anybody else excited about this besides you? There's this great quote from Jeff Bezos, who's the CEO of Amazon, right? The biggest company in the world, or one of the biggest companies in the world. When he talks about, they do all kinds of crazy projects. They had the Fire phone, they got the tablet, they made their AI system, the Amazon Echo. They have online web services and AWS, and they sell everything. They just started off just selling books. Why are they doing all these things? And the way he figured out how he knows what project's going on is if somebody that he respects is still excited about it, right? Somebody on the team that he cares about is like, they're willing to put themselves on the line for it, he'll keep working on it. So you have to see, is there anybody else besides you that's really fired up about it? Are you still fired up about it, right? If you are not fired up about it at the end of your deadline, okay, maybe you should set it aside. And then I talk about this some in my book, but there's two paths, right? One is, if something isn't working, if it's kind of in this fuzzy zone and you're not sure, just keep trying stuff. Just keep pounding away. Try something different, keep going. And the other path is let it sit. Like, put it away for a little while. If you went through, you spent a month, you spent 3 months, whatever it is you allotted to the project, then set it aside, put it on a shelf. But first, write things down. This is another one of my magic rules. For those of you that stayed this long, write things down is one of the most important things you can do. You're going to have random ideas when you're on the subway or in the shower. I actually have a notepad in the shower. I can write stuff down. Write down your ideas. In this case, write down all the rules of your game. Write down any notes you have about the stuff that worked or didn't. Make sure everything's recorded, because when you leave it and come back, you're going to forget things. I promise you. I've forgotten way too many things over the years. I've learned this lesson way too many times. But don't forget. There is and then let it sit for a while. Work on something else. Go do something else. Go, and then come back to it. Maybe put a note in your calendar, you know, for a couple weeks later, a couple months later, and come at it with fresh eyes, and maybe it'll be interesting to you. I have a very long list of projects, about 100+ games and mechanics and half-formed ideas that are, you know, on the back burner. And then sometimes years later, like the game Ringmaster I released this year, yeah, just a few months ago, is this cool circus-themed, really fast card game. And I had actually been working on the mechanics for that game for like a decade, like forever, because there was all these just little bits and just never quite got there. And I put it on a shelf and would take it out every once in a while and play with it and put it back on the shelf. And then finally, we had a new graphic designer came in and came up with a circus theme idea, and it all clicked, and I finally got the game together and got it launched. So you never know. There's no idea that's truly dead. They're only just lessons and opportunities for the future. So I think that's a great way to end this. If you want to stay connected with me, obviously, you know, you guys should already be on the email list, stoneblade.com. I also have the workshop that the Facebook group is called Think Like a Game Designer Workshop Group on Facebook, where you can join, and it's just designed for people that want to make games and have questions and stuff. And you know, it's just kind of starting up, and I've only invited people that have been to my workshops before there, but you guys are here, so you guys are invited to join that as well. And thanks to your polls, I'm going to see about doing some more of these and maybe creating some more cool ways for us all to get together. So whatever you do, please get out there, start making stuff, start iterating. Let me know how it goes. Send me emails. I love hearing from you. This has been a lot of fun, and thanks for joining me.